19. From the conditions of the ketubah, that the male sons should inherit their mother's ketubah, and also the dowry that she brought in, as what we said is iron, sheep, so in barzel are things. There's there's what belongs to the husband, but or what belongs to her, but either way they are inherited by the sons, and afterwards they divide them equally. For example, a lady got married with a kasuba, and then she got a nadunya. And nadunya, she brought in $1,000, and she had a son, and she died. And afterwards, um, and she died during his life. And afterwards, another lady got married. The guy married another lady, and her kasuba, her nadunya was 200, and she had a son and died in his lifetime. And afterwards, he died, and he left 2,000. So now you have the husband dying and both wives dying, and two sons, one from each wife. The first son will get 1,000 of his mother's ksuba, the $1,000 nadunya, the dowry, and the second son will get the 200 extra, and then they will divide the rest equally. Comes out in the first son, he'll get 1,400, and the second son will get 600, because the ketubah is a ketubah is already 200. Okay, when do we say this? That if he left more than the two ketubahs, one dinner or more, in order that everything should be divided equally. But if he didn't leave anything, then everything is divided equally, because if this one gets his mother's ketubah, this one gets his another ketubah, and there's nothing else for them to divide, comes out the conditions of the Torah's inheritance won't happen. And that's the same thing. If the guy marries many women, either one after another or in one shot, and they all die during his lifetime, and he has male sons, if there's more than the kasuba a dinner, each one gets their own mother's kasuba. But if not, if the father does not have any assets, and all there is the kasuba, then they divide the kasubas.
Does it mean that if the estate is worth less than the two ketubas?
It's worth less than a dinar. In other words, there's no estate, basically.
Dinar more?
Yeah, a dinar more than the two was together.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the estate is worth less than the two ketubas,
So then they divide it.
split it equally.
Yeah.
But if it's worth more,
Because all these ketubah things are all rabbinic origin. All the ketubah laws. And the biblical law of inheritance takes precedence. So only if you can keep both laws, rabbinic and biblical, are we able to do them.
So if the estate's worth
A dinar more, yeah,
a
correct.
dinar more than the two ketubas, each son gets their mother's ketubah,
Yeah.
and the remainder is split.
And their mother's assets.
A dowry.
Dowry, yeah.
So they get their ketubah and the dowry
Yeah.
if the estate's worth more than
Yes,
combined
correct.
total.
Correct. Now, so let's say they say, okay, you know what? We will give assets to our fathers in order that we can take the kasubas of our mother. We don't listen to them. We calculate according to the day of her, like the time that the father died, and even though there's more or less after the father died before they come to divide, we consider it at the time of we calculate everything in accordance to the moment that the father died.
Okay, I understand
If there is more than taking all the ksubas, even though there's a shtar chayv, even though the father owes money to somebody else, it doesn't take down. They can still get their mother's ksuba, right? So even though he has the assets, but technically he has to pay out, it still will help them get the kasubas.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. If he has, someone who has two wives, and each one dies during his lifetime, and one dies before he dies, and one dies after he dies, and he has two sons from both of them. Even though he doesn't have more than two ketubas, if the second one swears, the wife swears the oath of the widow before he dies, then her sons can get the kesuba because they are not getting the ksuba of their mother on this condition, but they're actually inheriting their mother, right? So we said earlier that a mother has to make a widow to in order to get her husband's ksuba from she has to make this oath. So if she made the oath and then she died, then they're able to get it. And then afterwards, the first ones can follow this condition. And if there's nothing left over, they divide it equally. And if she dies before she swears, then the first sons get their mother's ksuba, and the rest they divide equally. Guy marries two wives, um, and from him. Okay, so a guy marries two wives, and from him there are sons, and he dies, and afterwards the wives died. If the wives both made their oath before he died, each one will get their ksuba of their mother, and without this condition. Therefore, we don't need to see how much assets he has to make this condition qualify. But if they don't swear, then they divide equally, and they don't get the ketubas because a lady does not get her ketubah until she makes the oath. Outside of Bezdin, right? But she makes the oath.
You know, the daughters, if there are daughters, are ignored completely through this. Is
Biblically, yeah.
That's biblical.
Yeah.
Did the rabbis ever make any kind of ruling of?
They're not ignored. They get food and sustenance till a certain age. But the rabbis said that if you want, you can choose to give to your daughters, but your son has rights over it. You know, like you have to basically make a condition and say, oh, I want something to go to my daughters.
So if one wife had daughters and the second wife had sons, do the sons of the second wife take precedence over the daughters of the first wife?
No, because a husband inherits his wife, and then there are other relatives, brothers, fathers, stuff like that. Okay, one of them swore and one of them didn't swear. This one that swears, their kids get the ketubah, and the rest they divide equally. Anyone who inherits a ketubah of his mother, they don't get from things with a lien. They only get from things with which don't have any lien on them, like all heirs. From conditions of ketubah is that the daughters get from their father after he dies until they grow up or until they get married. If she grows up, even though she didn't get married or gets married until she grows up, she doesn't get food anymore. So she can, I guess, join the workforce. A daughter gets from her father's assets after he dies, and even though the sons can say, hey, if you weren't alive, or technically we inherit you, maybe your work or your assets, whatever you get, should go to us, she gets to keep her own assets. You estimate and establish for her food and her clothing and her shelter from her father's assets, just like you do for a widow, and you sell for food of her and for clothing without announcing it, just like you do it. In other words, it's a pretty important fee. But women, the wife, you can give her according to her honor and the honor of her husband. But the daughters, you give her the minimum. You don't have to give her, beautiful clothing, etc., and she doesn't need to make any swearing that she didn't sell her rights.
She would not have any tangible assets.
Correct.
To carry forward as a dowry.
Correct.
If her father dies.
Correct. Yeah, that's basic
Where would
law.
she get a dowry from, or she just wouldn't have it?
Either she wouldn't have it, or it's the question is a dowry isn't necessarily a halachic responsibility. It's something that people do. So
I know, but it's valuable in
correct. So
in the marriage.
Correct. So just like during the life of the father, he doesn't have to give a dowry, but he might choose to because he wants to marry a good person and have a good grandchildren or whatever it is. He's investing in it. So this is the minimum what she gets. This based on biblical law. Could be the brothers would want to provide a dowry, or the wife, or could be the father wants to set up that she'll have a dowry. But this is, he dies. What do we need to do?
It's just that if when she becomes marriageable, a father with a son will be looking, may favor a woman who has a dowry over a woman who
That's
does
true.
not.
That's true.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not questioning the halacha.
Yeah, no, that's true. So that is a nice thing for a father to do and brothers to do, and but the basic law is she just gets her food, and then she'd have to, and this is even when she becomes an adult, which is actually halachically 12 and a half, she'd have to get a job, and then now that's what she would have to.
And in many cases, I mean, in many cases, if the husband, say, is studying Torah, the wife is running a business or actually providing the wherewithal.
Yeah.
Is she entitled to any of the financial benefit of she's running a business for the family and the husband dies?
So, okay, so like
She'd be a widow.
she can make conditions, they can make conditions, they can speak with each other, but if they didn't, what are the biblical legal rights? So, usually she'd be a widow, and then the sons would have to provide her with a decent life, in other words, but not necessarily any hard assets, unless she made a condition that she would get hard assets or she would work out a deal with them.
She could make a contract with her husband.
She can make a contract with her husband,
for her to be entitled to.
Correct, or with her sons.
Or with.
Right, if the husband died already, she can say, hey, look, you guys have to pay me $500 a month or whatever it is. How about you just give me this piece of land, and then she can do that. But her rights, her biblical, or her rights, whether they're biblical or rabbinic, her rights are the original legal rights are she has to have sustenance.
Okay.
Yeah. The children do not get the ketubah of their mother rights until they have the ketubah. However, if there is no ketubah, they don't get anything, because maybe she got rid of it, maybe she forgave it. She has the rights to do that. And if it's a place where they don't really write ketubahs, then they have whatever conditions in that place has. Someone who says they take one of the conditions of the ketubah out of the ketubah before they die. They say, do not support my wife, do not support my daughters, or my sons shouldn't inherit the mothers of the ketubah of their mother. We don't listen to him. If he gives everything that he owns as a gift to someone else, then let's say he says, okay, you know what? Everything I own belongs to so and so, right?
Belongs what?
Belongs to so and so. I'm giving everything as I have as a gift. So the rule is if someone's on their deathbed and they do that, it doesn't belong until after they die, and therefore at the moment they die, he can't get rid of the responsibilities he has. So he would have to do that before, like long before he dies, if he doesn't want anyone to get anything, right? So then they do get from whatever conditions they have.
In the Rambam's era, did such a thing as wills exist? A contract?
They always existed. But the Rambam here is talking about the Talmudic law.
Understood.
So,
I understand.
yeah, they did. They always, even in the times of Talmud, you could make conditions. Certain conditions work, certain conditions don't work. If you go against one of the laws of the Torah, then your condition doesn't work. If you can't take away rights that the Torah gave to somebody, right? You can, but there are ways you can do it. Like, so, for example, if someone is healthy and they give away all their assets to somebody else except for what they need for basic sustenance, so now, or they borrow back, or they have that person provide it, then their kids won't inherit anything, right? Because their assets don't belong to their father. But if he's on his deathbed, then it's a lot easier to do. So there's different.
But if he's alive and he has a son and a daughter, let's say, he knows the halacha, but he wants to provide assets for his daughter.
Yeah.
He can do that.
Well, I was talking about halachic will earlier this year, which I spoke to a lot of rabbis. I didn't actually get to the bottom of it, but seemingly it's important to fill out that document because the rabbis basically, biblically, if the son comes and says, hey, actually this is all mine, he has a point, right? Now, so what do you need to do? basically what they do in their will is they say, I'm giving this assets to my daughter, or I'm giving everything that I own is gonna you has to produce this amount of assets for my daughter. So basically, the son will have a choice. He either will take what's given to him, or he either will take what's given to him, or he'll also give to the daughter, and he'll take what's given to him and give to the daughter, or everything is tied up to pay the daughter. So there are ways in halacha to do this, and in those days, people likely, I mean, that's an ancient thing. I don't think the Rambam brings that. He might actually, but he doesn't bring out the specific
But
way
he
to do it.
couldn't write a will that would be halakha, that supersedes
Torah law,
biblical
correct.
law.
Correct, and biblical law gives rights to the son, right? So,
So
in
he
other
would
words, technically the son could say, hey, you have no right over what I inherit from you, right?
Even though my father wrote it, because now, but, so that would need to
Well,
be.
so nowadays in America, the wife inherits the husband first, usually, right? The assets all go to the wife or the husband, right? Now, the husband will get the assets biblically. He has rights to the assets, all the assets. The wife doesn't have rights to her husband's assets. But in America law, the default is that the wife gets rights to all the husband's assets until she inherits it to the children.
But in these cases, we're discussing
We're discussing
when
the
the
sons.
wife is done.
Well, depends. Yeah, when the wife dies is for that ketubah, but when the husband dies, like here we just talked about a case that the husband died and he said, I don't want my wife to get anything from me. Zero. I don't want her to get food from me. He's not actually able to do that.
Right. I'm just, in the case where the wife is dead and the husband, he cannot write a will that gives assets to his daughter after he dies. If he wants her to have assets, the daughter, then he has to give those assets to her while he's alive.
Correct.
I just want to make sure
Yes,
I'm
correct.
not disputing the law, I'm just trying to understand.
Correct. And the son, I mean, I presume, I see some people make a big deal about this in modern wills, but some don't. I presume they just say, okay, well, the kids agree to it. The son essentially, the firstborn son and every other sons essentially say, like, okay, I'd like to do what my father wants, even though I have rights, right? That may not always be the case, but that's possible to happen.
So when the husband dies, the wife inherits. Right? Now, when she dies, what's the biblical law? Is the biblical law for the division of her assets the same as in the reverse,
Same as the father?
if the wife had died?
Well, there's two things. Number one,
That is, it goes all. If
it
she
goes all
dies,
to
does
the,
everything
it
go
goes
to
all
the-
to the husband first. It goes all to the husband first. If a wife dies, then now there is also the ketubah.
No, my question is,
Yeah.
if he dies, his assets go to the wife.
Not according to Jewish law.
They go to the sons.
Yeah,
It bypasses the wife.
yeah.
So what happens, so how, that's biblical. So what happens? I mean, if you want to have a halakhic will, and biblical law is it goes to the sons, not the daughter, not the wife. How do you, is there a way?
Yeah, there is.
You understand?
Yeah, so there's this document that basically makes it that you calculate that you're giving something to your child before you die, or you're giving everything to your wife before you die, and that absolves. In other words, you can give a gift. Inheritance is its own laws. So that's kind of how you write in a document that before you die, you're giving everything you own to your wife.
The document, my will says
Was aware of it, and he'd say, "Hey, 1 second, no, here, I'll give you the house and a car or whatever. I'll give you your needs according to whatever you'll live the same quality of life, as till now, and I'll pay your bills, but I get all the assets. Technically, your son would have the right to do that. The thing is because civil law is not like that, it would be impossible to enforce. But the thing is, the other way of looking at it is could be technically you're stealing from your children, halachically. In other words, you're going down stealing from your children if they don't forgive, because they have the right to bring it to court. And so yeah, that is correct. So that is the importance of halachic will. I see it's pretty simple form, but back when I was researching it, and I was like, hey, I would love for somebody, find someone who does this professional lawyer who was researching it, and he actually got very sick. I mean,
So
he
my
has a terminal
question is
illness.
really has to do not so much with practical matters, but the principle. If I die tomorrow, my wife will inherit all of my assets.
Yeah,
Our son will never contest that,
correct.
but it's still violating biblical law.
Correct. Well, so technically speaking, your son has the right to forgive, right? To forgive and say, it's okay, I don't want to contest that. He has the right to do that. So,
But he would never do that because he doesn't know.
correct. Well,
biblical law.
correct. So now really the thing is like when you die, you want a clean slate. In other words, I don't want stealing from anybody. I don't want anyone to have hard feelings. I want to, pay off all my, I don't want anyone to have any grudge against me. So that is the importance of it. Yeah.
Or I just want to be square with God.
Correct,
In other
correct.
words, if it's biblical law, that means that's God's intent.
Correct. In other words, God gives rights to him, and maybe in his heart, right, or maybe he's unaware of his rights, and if he was aware of his rights, maybe. So yeah, that's
It's a matter of
definite answer. Like bigger rabbis, if I said, is it as simple as it looks, and they wouldn't give me a definite answer. So
say within the Chabad, call it the righteous community.
do people do that? Some people definitely do that.
I mean, you'd have to. Biblical law exists in its own right. I mean, it's above and beyond everything else. So,
Roughly, you need a credit card? Shopping? Yeah.
so it seems to me, if you want to do it consistent with, say, civil law, there has to be a work.
So do is they basically take
1 minute before I die, I give all my assets.
and they basically say the typical terminology in your will. So they'll say like this clause, and they're all legal clauses. This clause, when it says this word, it means this. The definition is this, and it removes the halachic definition. Just like, when I borrowed a lot of money, I did a heter iska. So it says is like whenever it says lend, it means investment, and whenever it says
There's got to be something like ribis that allows you.
so the ribis one is very straightforward just to fill out. And so I was wondering if this one was, and I couldn't find anyone who was really into it. So
I mean, it's just not that I am righteous. I don't consider myself to be righteous, but this seems like if you want to die observing biblical law with respect to this issue, but you want your assets to go to your wife, there has to be a halachic way.
well, so I think I spoke with JLI because I told JLI, obviously there's a large transfer of assets at wills to Chabad potentially. A lot of the charity in America is given after death. So, rabbis are always saying, remember us in your will, and remember, leave a legacy, and whatever it is. So I told JLI, actually, I said, you guys should make a class on it, because this is a great way to, first of all, people, when they die, are interested in keeping halacha, even if they didn't during their lifetime. They want to be buried as a Jew. And I said, this is something which is a great conversation opener, and it's a, talk about wills, and it's comfortable to speak because people do have living trusts and everything like that. So they told me that maybe they're going to include it in the third course this year, somewhat, because the third course is medical ethics. So it does talk about death. So maybe this year, I don't know if they're actually what extent, but I said maybe they'll include it because if you educate people with this, it'll a lot of people aren't aware of it. And I do know, like, let's say, like, also another thing that people do is they want to give their children, they want to fulfill the biblical law. So they give, let's say, a certain amount of assets. They do give more to their male children, and to they do give a certain type of asset only to male children, and they do give the firstborn double, and they do that in order to fulfill, even if it's a small amount. But they want to say, let's say, all their assets are given away as a gift and go according to the law of the civil will, and then this amount of money, $1,000, is going to go towards the inheritance. That the firstborn son will get 500, and the other two sons will get 250.
But in the limit, sort of in the extreme, for example, leave the wife out of it. I mean, let's say when I die, I want to give Chabad $1 million. And I do that in my will. My son
Correct.
could take that will to a Beit Din
Correct.
and challenge it and say, no, I'm the son, I come before Chabad.
Correct. That is correct. And actually, that happens a lot.
So that's,
Yeah, correct. Now, the reason why that doesn't happen a lot in a Beis Din is because they'll probably say, okay, you want to work Beis Din, okay, so let's shuffle this up a little bit,
yeah, they'll find something.
In other words, yeah, you don't follow Beis Din, and so the son likely on a regular average will, there'll be wins and losses, they're very but yeah, I mean, civilly, yeah, so the truth is, it is something that I think should be explored more.
But it seems to me Chabad should provide a way to do things halachically.
Correct, absolutely. You're correct. So I asked a bunch of expert rabbis, and none of them were this expertise. And it could be who does it, and a lot of people in New York use him, and he does the halachic will along with the civil will, because could be, I don't know, it could be rabbis got brought to civil court for doing that. I don't know. We know that
Okay.
generally wills get very, very, even in civil law, they
Well,
get.
we've talked about this halakhic will thing before.
Yeah, so I actually still have in that drawer there. I have all the papers and everything. My impression is I should probably call a lawyer, but it looked like it was very straightforward. It looked like it was quite straightforward. And now, considering the halachic will supports the civil will, so any legal battles will be done in court anyways. In other words, no one's going to come and say, hey, you didn't write the halachic will properly, so now, so it seems straightforward. I just couldn't get anyone to verify and to confirm.
You don't want to create headaches for your
Correct.
survivors.
Correct.
But on the other hand, it seems to me reasonable that a person, especially a pious person, would want to be sure that these things were squared away.
Absolutely.
And even a non-pious person, sort of as the last thing in their human existence, they'd like to do a lot.
No, absolutely. I think it's I actually thought a lot about it, and I just needed to find so I have a friend who unfortunately has a terminal illness, but he's a lawyer, and his firm is an Orthodox Jewish firm, and I know that they were in the midst of, they have it's Orthodox Jewish firm, so they have yeshiva days where they all go and they study Torah, and this is what they were studying, how to do it. And also, the other thing is let's say legally, as soon as somebody dies, if they don't have a will, all their assets are transferred to their partners. So that is another thing which, even if you don't write a civil will, but that's the legal repercussions of death. So they were working on that at the last time I spoke to them. That how to work with that. But yeah, absolutely, it seems like it is an important subject. I'll look up that lawyer. I mean, they told me his lawyer. I looked up his last name now. There's only two lawyers, Miami lawyers, to have New York addresses, and New York lawyers to have Miami addresses.
So there was a guy in Baltimore, Aryeh Gutenberg. He's not Chabad Lubavitch, but he is frum, and he is an estate attorney. And when we lived there, he did our wills. Aryeh Gutenberg. I'm gonna.
You give him a call, yeah. I mean, ask of essence is what state you live in and how how things match up and everything like that.
Yeah, he wouldn't know. He wrote a book on Maryland inheritance law. He has the
Yeah.
source authority. So there are state-by-state differences, so he wouldn't know.
Well,
if
so the
there-
truth is, though, is in my opinion, I mean, looking at the halakhic will writings I saw, it looks very straightforward. It looks like something you do in shul. I mean, you have to get witnesses and whatever it is, but it looks
Like
very,
selling your comics.
yeah, it looks pretty straightforward, and it doesn't have, and then you just have to get it like put in with your will, and it doesn't really have any legal ramifications at all, and so they added. I think you're supposed to add a clause in your regular will saying that we're doing this in accordance to this document, which is in the book, which is based on this rabbi, and I look pretty straightforward. I just called several rabbis, and maybe I could call more rabbis who I thought would be able to answer. And I said, "Hey, is this as straightforward as it looks? Because you know you don't want to do it wrong or mess it up or mess anything up." So all of them said, "Oh, I'm not really involved in that
I
topic
bet
now."
if you do a class, you'll get a phenomenal turnout.
Possibly. I mean, on one hand, you
And
know,
then
you never
have-
know.
You
Because
have people who are intermarried too, where the wife is Jewish,
or vice versa. Yeah, I mean,
and I bet they have lots of questions. Anyway, okay.
well, so yeah, in
Sorry
order to
about
get
the
expertise
digression.
in this, you probably need a lawyer who's familiar with a rabbi working together, or a rabbi lawyer, which there are plenty of those. Well, a state, you know, when you're looking for a lawyer, from my experience, if you get a lawyer who's not familiar with that type of law that you're looking for, a lot of times you're more knowledgeable than them.
I
You know,
understand.
if you get a
I do.
lawyer who's a patent lawyer and you ask him about estates, good chances you know more about estates than him. There's
But
no,
I'll bet Aryeh.
yeah, ask him, or he'll probably at least be able to refer you to, you know, he might say, hey, just fill out these forms, you know, and it's that simple. Uh,
He is a super nice guy, but he's a very firm guy, wears a kippah all the time, and I'll bet it's a great question.
yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm not disputing anything.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important thing. I think that, you know, I also think it's like, you know, you're supposed to give tzedakah in your will, and there's a certain way of putting it in, like, and it's like a spiritual thing. So, like, there's many traditions in the wills and everything. There's many traditions of how to do it, and different things that you're supposed to write and not write. And I think that it's a good topic. In other words, halachic will. It's good to talk about wills. People might not know about it, or will it bring a lot of people? I don't know. You know, if you mention the word wills, a lot of times people can get like scared, or they'll get nervous about money or this or that. They'll be like, okay, this is just a scam or whatever it is. But that is correct. I do think it seems to me that it is an important halachic thing, and it could be the reasons why rabbis Bezdins don't really push it. Might be, unfortunately, because we're never going to get a case that disputes it. But yes,
I think that the question would be how to have a civil will that is also
Correct.
halakhically. And I think that there would be a lot of interest.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mentioned it to JLI, and they said, oh, hopefully the last class this year. But I don't know if they're, you know, I don't know if they're actually going to do it, and I don't know how much, you know, I think that whoever does it has to go all the way down until people are able to sign and actually do it.
Well, it would make a good add-on to this next class.
The next one of the Advice for Life. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I just have to find a lawyer who's able to go and say, yeah, let's do this here. Take my form, sign this form,
and be confident that it's correct.
And, you know, yeah, sign this form. You could tell people that this is my fee. You know, this is my fee. You know.
But for you to be confident, you would have to need some kind of sign-off from a Chabad of Prescott.
Either a posek or a lawyer, or a religious lawyer who would be willing to, you know, even if you could say, look, this is the lawyer, he charges a couple $100 and whatever, this is how you do it and everything like that. I didn't find a lawyer I didn't search that much, but everyone's like, oh yeah, this is the guy who does lawyers in Brooklyn or whatever, who does estates in Brooklyn. But yeah, if we can get a lawyer to do that, and then it would be a good service for people. And now, not everyone, you know, it costs money, which means some people would do it, some people wouldn't do it, but at least the option should be available.
I think it's a good question. I mean, we would do it. We have theirs. in our wills, there's $100,000 for Chabad of Prescott. That should be done halachically.
Absolutely. Well, every aspect should be, and you shouldn't, you know, um, you know, you shouldn't. Everything should be done halachically. I really think that it is like just like people when they get buried, they want to get buried Jewish, you know, even if they, I mean, unfortunately, not everybody, but even if they didn't necessarily live as a Jew, they like to die as a Jew. I think this is included in that subject, and even if not, I think it should be available. I absolutely think so, and I kind of started with it and kind of fizzled out. I called a lot of people and I asked them, you know, hey, who does this? They're trying to send me around, you know. Again, you know, not every, just like it's kind of a, not every posik is going to be an expert in these and how to do it because as I said, it would be very rare that someone would come and say, hey, I want my rights, because you'd be opening a can of worms on yourself also.
Yeah,
Like, let's say a daughter would come
Yeah.
and say, I want my rights, and they say, actually, you have no rights, you know, and you thought you had civil rights, now you have no rights. So, and then automatically you'd have two people fighting. Like, imagine if your son would go against your wife. So your son would go to the rabbinical court, and then your wife would go to the civil court, and then the the rabbinical court would probably say, hey, we want nothing to do with this because, you know, we don't want to be audited, and whatever, like we don't want anything to do with this. So that could be where this went. But again, to me, it looked so straightforward and so simple. I just need someone to talk to and say, yes, it is that straightforward and simple, and a lawyer, because there would be some legal difficulty as a result of it. And
Of effort required to, and so it gives a person an opportunity to do something